Hi, welcome to the Girls Table podcast, and I'm your host, Tariro. And today we have Samantha Sibanda, the director of Signs of Hope Trust, a trust that caters for persons with disabilities and everything to do with disability rights in Zimbabwe. And she is based in Harare. I am talking to her about an initiative on the economic inclusion of persons with disabilities, in particular young women with disabilities. Her idea of inclusivity a budget, but you might see it as the word inclusive budget. And thank you for coming to the podcast, Samantha. Can you just please tell us where the idea emanated from and why you decided to do the inclusive budget initiative?
Thank you so much, Tari, for having me. So, the Inclusive Budget Project is really a project that is supported under a grant that is given to Signs of Hope. But I must hasten to say that the idea came from a lot of people. As many might know, Signs of Hope deals with the public, and we did a policy lab that was informing what kind of programming we must do. So the policy lab then was informed by persons with disabilities, stakeholders from the members of parliament, from the government, so journalists and the media. So that's where the idea came from. It was actually chosen out of crazy eight ideas that we had of things that we wanted to change. So at the end of the day, we realized that there's a clause in the Zimbabwean constitution that talks about availability of resources when it comes to disability focused programming. So that's where the idea came from. And as stakeholders, we agreed that it would be a good project for people to have so that we can advocate for a disability responsive national budget.
Thank you, Samantha, for clarifying that it was an idea brought up by different people, and in trying to promote an inclusive, a disability inclusive budget. I understand that this was from a perspective where you had noticed that the government wasn't prioritizing persons with disabilities. I want to understand that from when you started until now, have your recommendations been taken into consideration by the government? If yes, how many have they taken and how many have they not even considered? And what measures are you taking as an organization and also as an individual in making sure that what you suggested as an organization must be taken into consideration? Because from a disability point of view, young people especially are affected, young people with disabilities are affected by not having enough budget, whether for trying to ask for loans, their social grant is not coming in. What have you done?
Terry, in terms of budget allocations, I feel that there's still a long way to go because when we see the things that were granted and not granted, there are still a lot of things that persons with disabilities were expecting. Number one was the issue of accessible transport, the issue of an albinism fund that we were advocating for, so that lotions can be produced in Zimbabwe, and that the government can give free sunscreen lotions to persons with disabilities. There were some wins in terms of having businesses funded by the government for persons with disabilities under the Women's Bank and the Youth Bank. So these banks, the Women's Bank in particular, was given 3 billion Zimbabwe dollars, and the minister actually said in his statement that people with disabilities projects should be also supported under that fund. I also must say that persons with disabilities, even under this project, were commended for coming out in their numbers and also for the quality of the submissions that they made. I want to believe that we had something to do with that because we have been sharing the information even in a WhatsApp group, sharing about the key documents such as the budget strategy paper that people normally don't interact with before sharing the budget. Another win was that the Parliament of Zimbabwe agreed to Signs of Hope and our partner, uh, you know, translating the national budget into sign language and into Braille. So this is the first time that that has happened, and I feel that it's a win for our advocacy that the citizens' budget for persons with disabilities was a key document because the citizen budget explains what the budget is all about to the ordinary citizen, looking at the complexity of the submissions, looking at the complexity of even the allocations. So that was really a big win for participation in the near future, for the citizen budget to be in sign language and to be in braille, which are accessible formats for those with communication challenges.
Samantha, you're touching on a very important issue of accessibility to information, and how you've tried to sort of adapt and make sure that everyone is involved in this process. Um, how important is it for young women in particular to be involved in these budget processes? For example, right now we are having our local authority budget consultations where we can't really do them physically because of the electoral season that we're in. But I hope that we are doing as much as we can to contribute to the things that we think matter in this budget. So, how important is it for young women with disabilities to find themselves in this process and participate and make sure so that they're included in that part where you talk about it, and what would you encourage them to do in that space when they find themselves wanting to participate?
I also want to respond to what you raised about the social grant study. One thing that persons with disabilities were clear about at a town hall that we held was that there should be more efforts to empowerment, more efforts to a human rights based approach in terms of the allocations. If we look at the social grant, it's something that is being given uh, like a charity thing. And so, even at the end of the day, if you look at the Attorney General's report, it raised that the monies sometimes of the disability grant are redirected to other things. So it simply means that even during allocations, it's not prioritized. That is why there are delays in the disbursement, and you find out even the funds are also, redirected. People at the town hall were clear that they wanted government to increase, you know, empowerment programs so that people with disabilities don't continue to be beggars. They don't continue to wait for such a small amount of money, but rather to be self sustainable, self reliant. We seconded two women with disabilities to go to the pre budget seminar. This is a seminar where only members of parliament will be talking. But at that time, I feel that that was also another big win that the women with disabilities also told the ministers that they want projects that are going to make them self-reliant, because right now people with disabilities, some who are deaf, are just selling in town with small businesses, but only if the allocations and the focus of the budget would be to uplift their lives, to make them self-reliant, and have self-sustainable businesses even for their organizations. Okay, Tar, when we look at participation, AMA citizens, it's actually their right, people's right to participate. Section 141 of the Constitution compels the government to go to the people when they are doing these things. We can't just do a budget without consultation with the people. And so then during the drafting stage of the budget, citizens should also be consulted widely. So so besides that being, you know, a right, we look at the complexity of the budget. It becomes difficult because there are terms that are used, there are all these barriers that are used, and also we realize that the budget is timely. Every process in the cycle is timed. When the consultations will be done, there's actually a calendar. So all this, not knowing this and how complex it is, some people end up missing out. But I feel that it's good for CSOs such as others to sensitize the public about the importance of participating. When we look at especially young people and young girls with disabilities, it's clear in the gender budget that the needs of women with disabilities are not being taken into consideration. For example, the issue of public transport. There's the issue of in Harare they were clamping cars that are not parking at the right place. And one thing that we have been advocating for during the budget was that they must be, designated parking areas for persons with disabilities. So when we don't see all those things in the budget, we still see that, there is a certain, discrimination that is there. So the voice of the people with disabilities within the budget is still very, very critical. So from the allocations, you still can tell that the women or persons with disabilities are still being viewed as a homogeneous group. Women with disabilities have got their own needs, and that should be really clear from the allocations that these women have and their needs have been taken into consideration.
Thank you so much, Samantha, for taking your time to be with us here on the Girls Table podcast. Until next time, please do take care of your loved ones.